I think it's probably okay. I want to call this meeting to order. This is the Board of Trustees of the Mass Transit District, our meeting for October 26, 2022. Will the clerk please call a roll?
Barnes.
Here.
Delgado.
Here.
Dial. Fasella.
Here.
Hannon.
Here.
Nudo.
Here.
Chaplin.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Need a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second, anybody?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The agenda is adopted. Okay. Audience participation. We don't have an audience, but Alan has a little message he would like to convey.
After the brownie. So I have 2 tickets tonight to anybody in the room that wants to go to the Penn State. They're highly ranked. At the net, 4 rows up. So please take them from me.
Thank you. Pardon?
I was just offered 2.
Don't downplay this.
Well, we can ask you people to settle this all after the meeting is over. Okay, next item is the approval of the minutes of the open session of our last board meeting, which was on September 26, 2022.
So moved.
Be a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the September 28th board meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Communications. Carl, did you want to say anything about the thank you letter?
I'm not going to read it. It's a good length letter, but it is in the board packet and on the website, so anybody can read it. But it is from the Champaign County Bikes, and it's a thank you letter for our sponsorship and our advocacy for safe bicycling in the community.
Okay, thank you.
Nice job, Evan.
Next item on the agenda is the report of the managing director.
Okay, thank you. So this is regarding September statistics, and in September of 2022 we had 929,906 rides, so we are getting back near 1 million rides, and so I think that is healthy. That's 9% up from last September, and September of 2019 was still 21% more than what we saw this year, but that of course was pre-pandemic, so we're getting there. We're not there yet, but we are getting there. The year-to-date ridership was up 11.46% with so far 1.8 million rides. This next chart is, I've been showing you this for a while now. The September ridership by year, you can see the orange bar is 2019, and then we drop off in the pandemic, and we're really coming back. So I just think that's a good visual. Moving on to the monthly operating revenue in September, it was 0.3%, 0.3% above September of 2021, and year-to-date operating revenue was 7.8% above FY 2022. As a reminder, this is FY 2023. The monthly operating expenses for September were 2.1% above September of 2021, and year-to-date operating expenses were 5.6% above FY 2022. And the year-to-date operating revenues were $40,208 above budget, and the operating expenses were $1.5 million below budget. And with that, I would just direct you to the notes if you haven't had a chance to read those yet. But outside of that, I will take any questions that you have through page 36. Oh, you know what? Sorry, if I could, one other thing. She just coughed and it reminded me. I did want to give a shout out to Amy Snyder, our Chief of Staff. She just graduated from the American Public Transportation Association's Leadership Program, which is a fairly intensive year-long program with a capstone project. And in Seattle, I guess 2 weeks ago now, she participated in the graduation program, and so she has that under her belt, and so she's officially a good leader now. So congratulations, Amy. And then with that, I'll take any questions through page 36.
Are there questions for Carl from the board? Nobody? Okay. Then let's go on to the action items. The first one, which begins on page 37, is determining the amount of the tax levy.
All right, thank you. This is our annual setting of the levy. In October, we ask you to pass a resolution that sets the levy, and then we will come back at the next board meeting, which is in early December, and we will pass the levy ordinance, which will finalize the levy process. This is for revenue year 2022, and it's for the taxes that will be collected in 2023. And as per usual for the last 5 or so years, 6 years I guess now, we have this pending situation with the hospitals, the hospital properties in our community, and the pending lawsuit, or I guess not pending, but ongoing lawsuit in the appeals that are happening that create this unknown of what the final equalized assessed valuation will be in the community. And so we've calculated a levy that is capable of accommodating those properties should the lawsuit be resolved. But if it's not resolved, then that levy, no one should ever interpret that levy number as being what the increase would be, because under no circumstances would anybody see a 17.38% increase on their taxes. And other than that, I think it's pretty similar to what we've been doing the last several years.
I think we might note that in front of you at some point there should be a revised version of the text that's in the packet.
Apologies, yes, thank you. Yeah, we did have an error that showed up in the packet in the resolution in B and C of the resolution. The documents that we get from the Champaign County Clerk have started showing a new line item that, quite frankly, was confusing to us early on. It's called revenue recapture. And it's a new line item that showed up, and so we originally included that in the levy and then got clarification that it should not be included in the levy. And so this document reflects that number being in last year's levy, but we're not supposed to use that in the calculation, and so we backed that out. So in B, the 10,065,000. The new number in the resolution that is on paper in front of you is $10,007,891, and so that then affects the percentage in C, and so that is the 17.15%.
How do you calculate the average? The actual, actual levy?
Yeah, so the question is, how do we calculate the actual levy? We actually don't calculate the actual levy, if I understand your question. We calculate the estimated increase in the levy, and then the county clerk's office, they end up calculating the final levy, because when their books get all closed down and they know what the final EAV or equalized assessed valuation, then they tell us, they apply the PTEL, the tax caps, they apply those calculations, they apply the final EAV and the rate, and then they tell us what that final amount is going to be. And that's kind of, that is what I was alluding to earlier, that, you know, we, just as a for instance, you have the sheet in front of you. Last year, we set the levy at 17.38%, but the actual levy was 5% because that's what CPI was. And that's, then the county clerk's office uses that to calculate that final number. So today, there are too many variables. These are all estimates that we're, today and in December, everything is an estimate that you'll be passing because we just don't have the answers to the variables yet. When those variables get definitive answers, then the county clerk calculates that and tells us what it's going to be, and that's what that 10,007,891 was.
So,
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Alan?
so Social Security is estimating, or pretty much coming out, it's going to be about 8.6% increase in the Social Security. Is that pretty much a predictor for what we are expecting if it was 5% last year with less inflation, or what do you think?
I think it's a predictor. I don't know that there's a one-for-one relationship between what Social Security says and then what CPI will turn out to be. So I can't answer that. I just don't know how closely that relationship is, but I certainly think that it's fair to say that it's a predictor, that we are looking at a higher percentage, which this 17.15%, it's not going to be that high, but it would accommodate what the CPI is. And then just as a reminder, the other side of that coin, hold on, Phil, I know you want to say something. The other side of that coin is our expenses, we also are seeing those increases, and so that's why we're trying to create a level playing field.
Well, I guess, you've heard this before, but my thought this year, especially with so many of our constituents, businesses and families kind of struggling to make ends meet with the inflation we're experiencing, is that this would be really a phenomenal year if Carl did end up on the tax rolls for us to, instead of trying to max out our tax caps, maybe limit the increase that we're requesting at CPI, maybe 8%. And that would give families some, modicum of relief from these higher tax bills that they're going to be getting hit by all of the taxing districts. I think it would be a windfall for us and it'd be phenomenal, but I just don't know that we need this money as badly as our taxpayers do. One thought that occurred to me, one of my, hobbies is I'm a firefighter over in Urbana Township, Carroll Fire Protection District. And I was looking at my tax bill, and we actually charge less to the Carroll Fire Protection District for fire, rescue, and emergency medical services as a district than the Mass Transit District does. So the Mass Transit District portion of the tax bill is about 20% higher than the fire protection section of the tax bill. And I think about all the things, we could use over at the firehouse, and I think about, Urbana Road and Bridge is like 20% under that. And again, they're maintaining, plowing, building all of the roads in Urbana Township, and they're levying substantially less than the Mass Transit District does. And both of those agencies bring in plenty of federal and state matching grants and dollars that get driven to their own districts. And at some point, I think that our constituents really need money in their own pockets, as cool as it is when we can bring in, an extra $60,000 for $20,000 of a down payment on a bus. People don't need a bus. They need to be able to, pay their bills and pay their rent and put food on their family's table. And I think we're at the point where if we went out and said we want to do a referendum to pay for maybe a hockey arena downtown as matching funds or this or that, I think we'd really have a very hard sell with our constituents to say the Mass Transit District needs another $2 million this year. Can you pass a referendum? I think we all know that our constituents wouldn't vote yes on a referendum if we wanted to raise their taxes. So I think we need to some degree, respect that there's people in this community that don't have an excess of resources, and if Carl's property does come onto the tax rolls, I think we're obligated to maybe let people have a little bit of tax relief and say, hey, we don't need to take a chunk of this. Let's spread it out amongst all the other families that are saying that they're paying Carl's share. Let them keep that, and just get by with about what we've been doing plus inflation. I think an 8% increase would be enough to cover our increased expenses, and would still, if Carl came on the tax roll and these estimates are right, it would give families a decent chunk. 8% off of $100. Maybe it's $8 or $10 for a family in a modest home, but it's a little bit of something. And I hope the other taxing districts would have enough grace to do the same, and maybe give people a fair shake. So that's my suggestion, is that we do 8%. But I'm just one person on the board.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question. Is there anybody who can give an update on the Carl situation in 25 words or less?
Wow, 25 words or less is
Well,
quite the restriction.
You lost about 8 there.
I mean, keep it short.
Oh, that was part of the count? Yeah, I'm toast. I don't know if Alex or your firm is involved, so I don't know that our corporate counsel that is present is prepared to do that. And I basically gave you the update that I'm aware of, that there's an appeal in the works, and I actually haven't heard anything recently about it even. Alex, are you
The only thing I can say is I believe briefs have been filed in the appellate court, but when arguments might be heard or then after that a decision might be made, it's a very unknown at this point.
Okay. So I think of this as the Full Employment Act for lawyers, keeping them going on this suit. Any other questions or comments for Carl on the determination of the tax levy? You ready to vote?
Hope the Gazette gets it straight.
Part-
Hope the Gazette gets it straight.
Bruce, would you please turn on your microphone? Okay, okay. Well, and I have noticed, if I may be allowed to comment myself, that I've only seen, I think, one black bordered box in the newspaper announcing somebody else's tax levy percentage increase. So do we know sort of what other agencies are doing?
I do not. I think I've only seen one or two. They generally start showing up in November, sometimes in October, but generally in November. So we may or may not start seeing that show up.
Okay, thank you. Well, if you're ready to vote, we need a motion and a second.
So move.
Which motion are you making?
On the tax levy ordinance.
As written.
Resolution 2022-9 as revised.
As revised on paper, the suggestion that I made that we cap it at 8%.
As revised by this sheet.
I think what we need to do is deal with, so we need to have a motion to approve as revised, as it's written in front of you. Then you can have a discussion, and if Phil wants to make a motion, you correct me on the Robert's Rules of Order, but I think that we have to deal with the one that's in front of you. Then you can take up a revision to it. Is that correct?
I think that would be correct. You'd want to have a motion on the floor as to the resolution 22-9 as corrected, seconded, of course, and then discussion, and then a potential amendment could be made or anything like that.
So we can second it and then have a discussion.
Yes.
All right, I'll second your motion.
Nobody's moved it yet. Oh, Dick did? I'm sorry. Okay, so it has been moved and seconded that we approve the revised resolution 2022-6, determining the amount of money necessary to be raised by the tax levy. Discussion.
Actually, point of information, I think it's 2022-9.
Oh, -9. I can't see a thing with these glasses. I miss my contacts. Well, Phil's already seconded it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so is there discussion of Resolution 2022-9? No, you ready to vote?
I mean, does anybody else think if we limit this to inflation, it would unduly harm the district if you know, we get an extra $1 million of Carl's money? Why don't we maybe throw that back to some of the taxpayers that are, you know, struggling to pay their tax bills rather than using that windfall for, I mean, things that, as long as we cover inflation, I think we're doing pretty well. That's my thought. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that.
Are you suggesting that we adopt the 8% inflation rate only if Carl...
Instead of the
Right,
17.15.
but only if Carl comes up with the money?
If we raise this by 8%, it will, we're requesting 8% whether or not, but if the assessed value doesn't increase by more than 8%, it's kind of moot. We'd only get 8% or less anyway. If really the only way we're going to see the assessed values go a whole lot more than 8% is if Carl comes on the rolls. So that's sort of what we're discussing, is if we get the Carl money, do we take it, or do we maybe allow for some level of tax relief and just take what we need to keep things about as they've been, you know, keep up with inflation. So I'm suggesting we just take what we need to keep up with inflation and we let the rest flow back to the other taxpayers that have been getting, you know, the full brunt of this since Carl dropped off the rolls.
Alan, and then Dick.
Just a point of order. I think maybe the discussion should be centered around this resolution. And then if it passes, then the conversation that Phil just brought up that's the point that he's making for making the revision.
I think if it fails, then it's then the conversation centers on what to do if this resolution fails. If you approve this resolution, then this resolution is passed. But if Phil has made his case and then this fails, then you take up a motion to revise it.
I don't know. I think it should be reversed.
I think what you...
I think Phil's motion should be presented, and if it fails, then we go forward with it, because then he doesn't have the opportunity. If it passes, it's moot, right?
Well, you can have a discussion. You should have a discussion about it now, and then you can... Phil is making a case that this should not be passed, and so you discuss that and determine whether or not you want to move ahead with this or Phil's alternative. I believe that's how it should progress.
I think that's one way you could do it. I think another way you could do it would be, Phil could offer a friendly amendment
To the motion on the floor.
to the motion on the floor. And that would pass or fail, and if it failed, it would go back to the original motion.
Okay. Dick, you had something you wanted to say?
Yes, if you look at these figures for proposed levy versus actual levy, looks to me like we're not taking 17+% historically anyway. So we have a much lower rate, so the 8% seems to me to be moot.
Yes. If I may, I'd like to clarify 2 points. I think Phil kind of addressed, but I also want to just make sure that everybody understands. Margaret, you said that Phil's suggestion was kind of an if-then suggestion,
Yeah, that was my impression, yeah. But
if the hospital, and you can't do that. You have to set a levy that we then turn into the county, and that is what it is until the county revises it using the PTEL, the tax caps legislation. So I just wanted to clarify that it's you can do one or the other, but you can't say it's going to be this, but will change in the future depending on what happens with the hospital properties.
Bill?
Absolutely. So we're setting a maximum, and then the the tax caps are going to kick us down.
Correct.
So if the assessment of the entire district goes up more than 8%, if you approve my amendment, then 8% is our max. We're saying, hey, we don't need more than 8, so if there's anything above 8, let that go back to the other taxpayers in the district.
Right.
If we set it to 17, we're saying we want the max that the caps are going to let us get. So if Carl comes on the rolls and the increased amount goes up to 15%, we're going to take that full 15%. And I'm saying, hey, if we need 8%, let's ask for 8%. And if Carl comes on the rolls and we've got this massive increase in available assessment, let's just take what we need and let the rest of it go back to the other taxpayers that are struggling to pay their bills, that are struggling with, expensive gas and expensive heating bills this winter and everything else that's gone up. I don't think that we need a windfall right now as much as the families in our district need a windfall right now.
And so that's correct, the technical part of what you described. And so relative to what you just said, Dick, the 8% would come into play if that, it could come into play in two ways. One, if inflation or CPI is greater than 8%, then we would be capped at 8%. We would never see anything above the 8%. Which is what Phil is promoting. And then the other thing is if the hospital properties, and I avoid saying Carl because I always think of me as Carl because it's all about me. And so I always get disconcerted when you say Carl, but I wish, yeah. So the hospital properties, because it does include OSF also, it's hospital properties. If they come on the rolls and we have no idea what parcels that the hospitals own that could come back on the rolls. But just hypothetically, if enough parcels that have an EAV that drive the EAV up above 8%, then we also would not capture that. It would be capped at 8%, and so the Mass Transit District would not benefit from those hospital properties adding to the EAV above 8%. At the 17%, that is like Phil said, it's a ceiling, it's a capacity that would allow for the district to access all of the EAV that the hospitals could potentially put on the properties. So I'm going to give you a hypothetical, and it will never be this to this because no one, I don't think, no one believes that 100% of the hospital properties would be added back into the EAV. But hypothetically, if it did, and that 17%, was full, was utilized, then we would have $11.7 million in our aggregate extension, our collection. I didn't calculate in 8%, so forgive me, but I did, for the sake of a conversation that I assumed we were going to have, I did a 10% calculation, and I also did a 5% calculation. So just for sake of conversation, if we set it at 10%, understanding that Phil's suggestion was 8%, but if we set it at 10%, then we would, if it was set at 10% and all of that EAV from the hospital properties came on the tax rolls, we would collect $715,000 less than if we set it at 17%, as it's written in the resolution in front of you. And that means that in 10 years, there would be $7 million that the district could have collected that we never have access to, and in 20 years, $14 million that the district could have collected and we never have access to apply to our operations, to pay for wages and salaries, to pay for fuel, to pay for buses, and so it it potentially will undermine the future of the district. And what I'm trying to do, I very much appreciate your perspective, Phil. I'm a local taxpayer too. I very much appreciate your perspective, but I want to protect the district because the very people that you're referring to that are struggling paying their taxes, many of them utilize our services to get to work because they can't pay for automobiles, or we don't want them to in automobiles because it adds to congestion. And so I want to protect the future of the district in order to be able to provide the services that get those very people to work and shopping and the very things that make this community work. And so I get what you're saying, but it's a real push-pull and a balance beam to walk on, where we want to be responsive today, but we also want to be responsive tomorrow. And so that's what I'm trying to accomplish.
Phil?
I guess I feel like $14 million that we don't have access to is $14 million in the pockets of our constituents who are paying taxes and who are struggling to get by. And I think it's disturbing to me that our answer is how much do we need, and it's always the maximum amount that we can take from our taxpayers. And I don't think that's the choice that our voters would make if they were here. If this was a referendum and they had to choose how much money they wanted to spend on mass transit, I think many of these people would choose to spend the money on groceries or gas or heating bills or their property taxes. I just don't, I don't, you know, we could sit here and say how much is enough, and the number is always to the max. I think that has to be flawed. I think we can get by with less. Like I said, we provide emergency medical care, fire and rescue to the district for 20% less than the mass transit takes to run 2 bus routes through the district. I mean, I think we do provide a valuable service, but I also think that there are a lot of things that people choose to spend their money on, and I don't think that mass transit is necessarily the thing they're aching to spend another $700,000 a year or whatever it'll be on. I think they want tax relief. I really do.
May I add another 2 cents? First of all, from what Alex said, it doesn't look like the hospitals are going to be making any contributions this year, as the suit doesn't look like it's going to be settled. And the other observation is, from the historical numbers that Carl gave us, we never would get 8% anyway.
So what would the harm be then in us amending this resolution to put in 8% instead of 17 and just taking what we think we need to keep up with inflation? That's my proposition.
Is this, are we going to vote on this?
Yes, we are.
And is this apply to every year in the future?
No, this is just for next year.
I mean, it compounds. It compounds because the tax cap law would say, well, you know, you're allowed the previous year's levy plus inflation. So this would, to some degree, constrain us in the future. However, I mean, that's the price we pay for giving people some of their money back if Carl comes on the rolls. And I do think that amongst taxing districts, we are sitting in a much better position than pretty much every other taxing district in our district as far as having the money to do what we need to do to take care of our constituents.
The schools and the fire are way ahead of us.
I would argue that fire is not. I mean, our firehouse, we've got 6 air packs and 10 firefighters. We're struggling pretty good. But, you know, that's just my opinion. And we don't pay any salaries. I don't get paid.
Are they unionized?
No, we're volunteers.
Well,
Okay.
you volunteered.
You agreed to do without pay, didn't you, Phil? Alan?
I'm sympathetic to Phil's position, but I don't think, I mean, I'm not willing to make this jump as to, you know, locking in something now. I mean, after the Carl OSF decision comes out in the next situation, maybe that's a time to consider it, but I'm not sympathetic to it now because we just don't know.
I agree with that.
We cap it at 8%, and then if Carl comes out, then we're we're good at 8%.
If, we're doing if then, and
But if it doesn't come out, we're still going to be below 8%, so it's a moot point unless Carl comes out.
I think we just go with what all the other bodies are going to get through CPI. Because we're all experiencing, I would like to see the CPI come down too, but it's.
So can we ask our parliamentarian person, where are we? Can we vote on this resolution, or do we have to do something about what Phil wants to talk about?
I think that Phil needs to officially offer a friendly amendment that would then need to be accepted by the movement and the person who seconded it. If it's accepted, then the friendly amendment, the provision with the friendly amendment would then be voted upon. However, if the movement and the person who seconded it did not accept the friendly amendment, then it would not be part of the original motion, and it goes back to the original motion.
Okay.
All right, hearing that, I would move that we amend resolution number 2022-9 to reflect instead of, boy, I'd have to do a calculation on the.
Yeah, Phil, let me help you on the amendment. Rather than
Do this real quick.
but I'm concerned about us making a mistake with the calculation in the moment. If Phil's amendment just is that we change the percentage in section 1C to 8%, then staff can go back and put that into our spreadsheet and calculate the dollar amounts. And that way we'll know that they're the correct dollar amounts. And your amendment, I think, it can just specify the percentage, and then we do the calculation. Is that reasonable, Council?
Yeah, I think that's.
All right, so moved.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. This, I believe, should be a roll call.
Barnes,
Nay.
Delgado,
Nay.
Vasella,
Yes.
Hannan,
No.
Nudo,
No.
Chaplin.
No. The motion fails. Okay, so that puts us back to voting on the original as revised, resolution 2022-9. This is also a roll call.
Second.
I think we already have a,
It's already been moved.
Right.
We don't have to do that.
okay.
What we need is a roll call. The clerk,
Got
please.
it. Okay, Barnes,
Yes.
Delgado,
Yes.
Vasella,
Nay.
Hannan,
Yes.
Nudo,
Yes.
Chaplin.
Yes. Okay, the resolution is approved. Okay, the next item is the contract with the Urbana School District 116.
Okay, this is similar to, similar but not identical, but similar to our agreement with Unit 4, excuse me, to provide transportation services for District 116 in Urbana for middle school and high school students. And so this is our annual agreement that we do. And I believe that the Urbana has already passed this version of the agreement, correct, Beth? Yes, so we'll be good to go after this.
Is there any questions or comments? Okay, if you're ready to vote, all those in favor of approving the agreement with the Urbana School District 116 for 2022-2023, please say aye.
Aye.
No, opposed, say no. The motion carries. Okay, next item is the Village of Rantoul Eagle Express Transportation Service Agreement.
And
Evan,
for
is-
this, I'm inviting Evan Alvarez, Special Services Manager, to the table.
Hello. So C-CARTS, the Champaign County Area Rural Transit System, is officially owned by the county. They contract MTD to operate it and have for several years. One of the service contracts that C-CARTS has is with the Village of Rantoul. They provide a fixed route service similar to what we have here in Champaign-Urbana, just kind of during peak hours. It's vans that run around Rantoul to go to and from jobs at the factories from about 5 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. and then 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. This is renewing that agreement for another year. The actual terms of the service have not changed. There have been no substantial route changes at this time. It's just kind of a renewal of what we've been doing over the last year.
Are there any
Alan?
questions for
Sorry.
Alvin?
No, I take.
Oh, okay. Any other questions? Okay, then we need a motion and a second.
Second.
All those in favor of the agreement with the Village of Rantoul Eagle Express Transportation Service and C-CARTS, say aye. Opposed, no? Okay, the motion carries. The next item is a contract for vehicle lifts.
We'll do these one at a time, but for the next three items, Ashley McLaughlin, External Affairs Director.
Hello. So for this first one, we are talking about the approval of safety lane contract for vehicle lifts. This is in regards to the need for 5 new in-ground vehicle lifts in the maintenance facility. Excuse me. The maintenance facility currently has 12 work bays that service the 60-foot buses, 40-foot buses, and vans. And 7 of the 12 bays currently have lifts, so 5 new lifts would allow each bay to have a lift and reduce the need for shuffling buses between bays to be maintained. Specifically, your memo states that we intend to require the 5 new lifts to be manufactured by Sturtell-Coney for consistency with existing systems. 5 of the existing lifts are Sturtell-Coney already. So this consistency will help with employee training and safety, as well as maintenance and standardization of parts going forward. Page 89 of your meeting packet includes a letter from Sturtell-Coney stating that the exclusive authorized distributor of their equipment is Safety Lane Equipment in Illinois. 100% of this funding would come from federal American Rescue Plan Act funds. And so, in conclusion, the recommended action is to authorize the managing director to execute a contract with Safety Lane Equipment Corporation in the amount of $1,240,662.97 for the purchase and installation of 5 in-ground vehicle lifts.
Are there questions for Ashley or comments from the board? No? Then we need a motion and a second.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the vehicle lift contract. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Okay, that motion carries. And the next item is replacing underground storage tanks.
Okay, for this one, there are currently two 15,000-gallon double-walled diesel fuel underground storage tanks on the 803 East University Avenue property. These were installed in 1993, so they're 29 years old, or 29 years ago. Recently, the south tank, there was discovered a small leak in that tank, in the inner tank, into the outer interstitial tank. Testing affirms that no fuel was leaked into the environment, but the cracked tank has been decommissioned, and so they're down to 1 fuel tank to service all of their diesel needs on the property. The estimated useful life of the tanks is 30 years, so with one cracked and out of commission and the other one, well, both of them nearing their useful life, it's necessary to replace both of them. Replacing them at the same time will save some money, and I should also note that because of their age, insurance premiums have already gone up on the tanks, and continued insurance is actually contingent on getting them replaced rapidly. So, in September, the district released an invitation for bid. One bid was received from Illinois Oil Marketing Equipment, a local company familiar with the property. We are confident that we conducted a fair and open procurement process, but we have contacted 2 other contractors who requested the full invitation for bid during the bidding process to see why they didn't end up submitting a bid, but we haven't heard from them yet. 100% of the funding will come from Federal American Rescue Plan Act funds, and the recommended action then is to authorize the managing director to execute a contract with Illinois Oil Marketing Equipment Incorporated in the amount of $1,144,971.14 for the replacement of 2 diesel fuel underground storage tanks.
Any other questions?
I got a question. How much is the insurance going up?
Well, I couldn't answer that specifically.
I don't know that actually I do know that I can't answer that specifically either, and I'm a little hesitant to give you a dollar amount, but I think that I'm pretty close in saying that it was roughly double what it had been previously with this year's premium, because the insurance carrier actually initially told us they would not cover it, and we poked and prodded a bit to try to get them to cover it, and they came back and said, okay, but the premium significantly jumped. I think it was around double, but I'm sorry, I don't remember the dollar amount.
Why don't we go in and repair this cracked welding?
Well, they're beyond their useful lifespan. They're essentially 30 years old, so they were scheduled to be replaced anyway, under best of circumstances and no leaks. We would just be, and sorry, let me also say, so they need to be replaced anyway, but the insurance issue had nothing to do with the leak. The insurance carrier said, even before we were aware of the leak, we don't want to cover these things anymore because they're at the end of their useful lifespan. We generally don't cover them when they're that old.
What filling stations in town have kept these things underground for 50 years?
I can't speak to what gas stations are doing. Yeah, it does seem like they keep them underground for a long time. I don't know if they, well, I can't speak to it. I don't know. I don't know how they do that. All I can tell you is what our situation is.
Yes, it's a lot of money for a couple of storage tanks. Do they have to be underground?
Above-ground tanks are a thing. They do make those, and they are possible to buy. They are above ground then, and you can't use the ground that they're on for anything else. When they're underground, we actually have space that we can utilize for bus movements and that kind of thing over them.
But they last indefinitely.
Not necessarily, and then you have the risk of having 30,000 gallons of diesel fuel sitting next to the building above ground if there's ever a fire or something, or an accident.
Depends on where you put them.
Well, Bruce, if you could turn your microphone on so that people can hear your part of the conversation. But so you're asking about above-ground storage tank, and it depends on where you put them relative to what Phil just said. Technically, that's true, but we have very limited space where we could put them. So we really could only put them in one location, and that location is essentially where they are now, underground. So we would just lose that space to use for anything else. And I have no idea what the cost of an above-ground tank is. I don't know if you do, Phil, but I mean, it could be the same cost. I just don't know.
They don't need to be double walled,
Well, we'd have to build a concrete enclosure around it.
They absolutely are double-walled.
above ground.
Oh, absolutely.
You have to build a concrete enclosure around it, so if it spills, it goes into the concrete enclosure, which would have to be 20,000 gallons apiece.
That's right.
So it would be a massive undertaking, and we, at the same time, I think some of this too is there's some level of urgency with fuel prices fluctuating. It would be nice if we had that second 15,000 gallons of storage so we could, potentially be playing the markets a little bit, right? And then have, if there's a supply shock, have the second tank in commission so we, diesel fuel right now, they're saying nationwide, we've got 25 days of supply, which is the lowest it's ever been as of last week. So God forbid if there's another supply shock, maybe we get a refinery taken out by a hurricane or some act of God or a fire, we could be in a situation where we can't necessarily get fuel for our buses. So having that extra storage is probably more important right now than it's ever been.
Yeah, I would agree. There is some exigency with this project. We, I don't remember exactly what month it was, but early on after Russia invaded Ukraine and fuel prices just went crazy overnight, shortly after that, we actually couldn't get diesel fuel from any of the local suppliers. We had to, I think from Chicago, from Chicago, we had to order it. And so we were, kind of on tenterhooks, wondering if we were even going to be able to get fuel. And that was when both tanks were active. And so we were taking a delivery per week. With one tank inactive, we are now taking deliveries twice a week. And so it's very, we really need to get the tanks replaced so that we can keep our normal operations going.
Does this 1,144,000 cover installation, everything?
It does.
Okay.
Well, and above-ground tanks would be subject to the whims of the weather, too.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure they're constructed in such a way that they, can deal with Illinois weather. But yes, diesel fuel gels in cold temperature, and so I don't know if an above ground tank introduces that more of a problem than a below ground. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if Josh feels like he can speak into that or not. But I don't know.
Certainly, temperature fluctuations are not good as far as keeping condensation from occurring in your tank.
Are there any other comments or questions for Ashley? Okay, then we'll need a motion and a second.
I'd move we approve it.
It has been moved and seconded that we approve the contract for replacement of the underground storage tanks. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay. Last item on the agenda is a contract for the design and engineering for the solar array expansion on 803.
Okay, so in February, this past February, the board authorized the execution of the Rebuild Illinois Capital Assistance Grant Agreement for $2,109,000 to construct an expansion to the solar array at 803. Dewberry Engineers completed the preliminary design and engineering that was used for the grant application. This contract that we're asking for approval for would include the development of final construction drawings and specifications to be used for the competitive bidding of the installation of the solar expansion. This contract would be locally funded. And just for reference, the existing array at 803 offsets approximately 20% of the maintenance facility's electricity consumption annually. This expansion would increase that to offsetting more than 50%. The estimation is that it would be able to offset more than 50% of that facility's annual electricity usage. So the recommended action is to authorize the managing director to execute a contract with Dewberry Engineering in the amount of $184,000 for design and engineering of the 803 solar array expansion.
Questions for Ashley?
I got a question. Oh, go ahead.
Alan had his finger on the pulse first.
What's the anticipated payback on this timeline, and do you have a feel for it?
Oh, I do not have that information in front of me.
Nor do I. I don't know. Jane is on the line, and if maybe we can put her on the spot if she happens to have that available.
Related to that, it's my understanding that under this Inflation Reduction Act, I believe the tax credits that we formerly would have had to offer to some for-profit entity involved in the project to get credit for them are now directly refundable to us as a nonprofit. Is that the case?
We are in the very early stages of the process of looking into, they're generally referred to as SRECs, Solar Renewable Energy Credits.
These would be the federal tax credits, but yes, the SRECs are also a wonderful
State,
benefit.
yep,
But I
yeah.
think the federal credits are now more advantageous to us than they were when we last voted on this.
I think that's correct. There are a whole new array, pardon the pun, of tax credits that are available. By the way, some of those are related to hydrogen also. So we're looking into how those apply, what are stackable, how many we can take advantage of and that kind of thing. We don't have any good answers yet. The IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, is just in the early stages of being implemented, and so IRS, the Treasury Department, they're trying to figure all of this out too, but we are in communications with them about that.
Bruce, you had a question?
Yes, what did we do last time with Dewberry?
Well, Dewberry was the engineer on so the first work they did for us was the solar array that is attached to the hydrogen station. So they did all the engineering for the solar array, and then because that went so well, we asked them to do the preliminary engineering work on this array that you're discussing right now for the grant application, for the grant proposal. The application proposal.
This is the one across the street.
The one that's across the street is the hydrogen station one that they did the engineering for that. This one that Ashley is talking about is on the roof of the maintenance department.
Ah, gotcha.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we'll need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the design and engineering contract for the solar array on 803. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion carries. That is the last item on our agenda. Our next meeting is December 7th, 2022 at 3 p.m. at Illinois Terminal.
I'd make a motion that we adjourn.
And Ellen?
Before we do, could I make either a request or maybe something more strong, insist, or something in between, that we have on next month's agenda the two topics. One on, we've already followed through with having legal representation for real estate. What we wanted to do is, have a firm that has expertise in that. We've done that. I'd like to have under discussion the appointment of a realtor, commercial realtor, to represent us in any transactions, real estate transactions in the future. I think I brought this up before, and I think it's time we had this discussion. We've done half of it. The second thing is, I would like an update on the MTD project right here of this building and the extension that, at one point the construction should have been started already by 2022. And I know with the dropping of the hockey program from U of I, it's changed that phase of it, but we have what we're doing, and we have partners involved in that we have heard nothing from as a board. I'd like to get an update on what the status of that is. So is that something we can do?
I would be happy to give you an update. To be perfectly honest, we keep hoping month in and month out that we're going to be doing that and bringing some action items for you to discuss as well. And we just keep getting waylaid as we try to do that. There's still some hope that we might be able to do that for December, but irrespective of whether or not we have the action items, I will be sure to give an update to the board.
Thanks, Carl.
Okay.
I guess back to Al's first item, could we make a motion that a discussion about the appointment of a commercial broker appear on our next agenda? Is that something that we can do?
I don't think you can make a motion because it's not on the agenda, but I can tell you that I will put it on next month's agenda for you if you would like. I mean, if the board wants that to be on the agenda, we can do that.
Do we have a general agreement that it wouldn't hurt to discuss?
I think pros and cons would be a good start and see if it's worthwhile to have a commercial representative in our dealings.
Yeah, it's fine with me to have it on the agenda, and I apologize, Phil, it's just compliance with the Open Meetings Act. You can't take action on an item that isn't published in the agenda, in this agenda.
Yeah. Okay, well, Carl will take care of that. Well, it's been moved that we adjourn, but nobody seconded it. Okay, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The meeting is adjourned.